Truck drivers of Reddit, while traveling through the night, what is the creepiest thing you've ever seen? NSFW. Obligatory, my brother-in-law, not me. But about 2 weeks ago he passed a car pulled over and parked all kinds of janky in the mountains and started to slow down just to be cautious. Just as he was coming up on a huge cliff on the right, his headlights lit up a dude dragging a screaming woman by the hair on the side of the road. The dude looked him dead in the eyes, pulled the girl up, then pushed her hard into the path of his truck, then took off heading back towards the strangely parked car. He had already slowed considerably since he saw the car, so he slammed on his brakes and stopped just in time, 5 feet in front of the woman laying in the middle of the road, then jumped out to check on her. She kept saying she didn't know the guy and I just asked him for a ride after and wouldn't elaborate as to what after was referring to, so we're assuming hooker/stripper. She wanted my bill to just give her a ride, but he said that's a terrible idea and called the cops and waited with her. Pretty crazy, but the cool thing is his boss gave him a pass on being like 2 hours late for deliveries, which was cool. I've swerved around a handful of suicidal people at night. One time it was a man in a suit. Was holding a briefcase too. Just casually slowed down and went around him. Got on the CB and warned the other drivers. Edit, so a lot of people are confused about what I said. What I meant is that I've swerved and missed people standing in the road numerous times. Not a group of people at one time. Trucker here, creepiest thing would have to be wind, tbh. Driving down the road and you can't hear it, and I couldn't feel it in my truck. However, the truck in front of me seemed to lift up and just flip on its side. It seemed like it was out of nowhere. I guess isn't that creepy? But when you're following and the truck in front of you seems to float up and onto its side, it is a little concerning. Not a truck driver, but friends with one. His answer is always a clan gathering that he woke up to while somewhere in OK. He never traveled alone, this time his wife was with him. He is Mexican, his wife is black. Needless to say, once they noticed they were burning a cross, they just hunkered down and waited until dawn. My dad's a trucker, and mostly he doesn't see much in spite of driving nights for damn near 30 years. But a few of the things he's seen. Bright lights like bubbles floating around over a forest. Hitchhikers that are unnaturally tall. Hitchhikers soaked in blood. Figures in the trees dragging dead animals. And my personal favorite, he went to sleep after buying dinner at a truck stop, only to wake up and find the truck stop completely abandoned and ruined the following morning. Edit, I get the fact that a lot of people don't believe me or think he was just messing with me. And if that's all it was, so be it. I was just mentioning what he's claimed to see. Stop blowing up my inbox with shitty comments. My dad was a trucker, and one late night he was pulling a log truck up toward home, about 30 minutes away. When he felt very prompted to get off the freeway, he turned and took a slower route home that went next to the freeway, but between this road and the freeway was this massive hole that some guy had been selling gravel out of. I'm talking 100 yards wide by 50 deep. As he drove by, he looked into the hole and saw a pair of headlights facing toward him, away from the freeway, and what looked like a person sitting in front of them. He didn't think too much about it, but something seemed uneasy. So he slowed down, looked really hard, but all he could tell was that it looked like a van of some sort. Next day the woman was found in a hole with a slit throat and a bludgeoned head. My dad gave his statement, but unfortunately it wasn't anything super helpful. I believe they found the murderer driving the van 2 months later or so. In 12 years I really haven't seen much that I'd call creepy. I've been tired enough where shadows would look like an animal running out in the road. I've driven by people walking and then not see them in my mirrors. Sometimes the creepiest ones are the ones that give you the open-mouthed stare the whole time you're driving by. Sorry, I've got nothing better. Edit, if I knew said people had vanished or had never been there, I'd probably be more creeped out by what I've seen. But it's always been dark, and there's always the chance said person may have rounded a corner while my eyes were in another mirror for a second, or may have been in a shadow I couldn't see. That chance of it being normal downgrades my feelings on it from creepy to huh, that was weird. You're probably more tired than you think you are. I'm not a trucker, but I have experienced shadow animals crossing the road a couple times when being tired while driving. One of those times I was headed back from vacation with a few buddies who were all asleep at about 3 in the morning. When I hit the brakes after seeing what I thought was an animal in the road, they awoke to hit the back of the front seats, which ended up being pretty funny. Freaked me out for a second though. I had a 4-year stint of driving 18-wheelers in between my Navy and Army time. Creepiest, Dead bodies in a wrecked car in Detroit. Cops were already there. Scariest, a motorcycle in a high-speed chase going the wrong way on the highway headed right towards me. Good thing my direction of travel was a 2-lane highway and the motorcycle and the 5 cop cars decided to drive past me in the lane I was not in. I was on US 31 in Indiana around 2 a.m. and had a pickup come the wrong way on the highway. 31 has a good wide emergency lane there, so I pulled the truck over and stopped. I had seen him coming and had enough time to get stopped. Sure enough, a couple of miles down the road, there was a bar and the guy had I don't know what happened. I did call 911 and report it. I ended up going on. I went out with my uncle a few times on night runs. He'd play coast to coast and talk about seeing shit, but honestly, the most state, all lanes full. He couldn't avoid what he assumed was a jumper off an overpass that landed just in front of the truck on the road. He hit him and slowed down as much as he could with a full load. Described it like hitting a downed deer. Bump. Found out later the guy pushed him. I think that it was a murder that bothered him more than hitting someone ending their own life. He also saw lights around air bases but didn't recognize the planes and his theories. I used to work stories. Not sure if this one is true, but it's a classic. He's a lot lizard get out of a truck and walk over to a puddle. She squats down, washes her vag and heads on over to the next truck. My dad, yeah, not me, sorry, is about as straight down the line as a person can get. No nonsense, no BS. In other words, I take him at his word with confidence. In the wee hours of the morning, he recalls it was the Scottish Highlands, long slog home ahead of him. He suddenly notices that something is craft of sorts, clearly made up to blend in and appear as a car, but it lacked any wheels and was very much hovering a good foot or so off the ground. After off into the distance at a hell of a pace, yet still observed lane discipline. Guess is whatever it was, he said it was pretty bloody creepy. I was humping over a triple day catching just enough dips in the sleeper to comply with paper trails. It was one of those, catching fueled with no does, except I was closer to catching the rays of morning in Nebraska if I kept moving. The shadows started darting around the headlights and I figured I needed to stop, if only for a bit. So I decide to stop at this rest area with a little diner attached. There's like 2 or 3 other guys in here and a waitress for some coffee and waffles. The lady says, "What? Coffee? Smoker." She goes to take my order. The coffee was strong and the waffles. Then right as I'm about to hightail the payload out of Kansas, I see this top off either way and got the bonus. This isn't mine, but one relayed to me years ago by my father. It's one of those friend of a friend type stories, so it's very possible it's just a tall tale. It's worth repeating just the same. It was the 60s or early 70s when a trucker hauling a bunch of new cars was passing through the desert on a 2-lane highway at night. Suddenly his headlights quit. The truck still runs fine, he still has parking lights, but it's not nearly enough light to drive by. He tried fixing the headlights but had no luck. That is when he had an idea. The car hauler was one of those that had 2 layers of cars, and one was up high enough for the headlights to shine right over top of the cab. It wasn't great, but it was at least enough to get him to the next little patch of civilization. He climbed up, turned on the lights of that new car, then got back in his truck and started driving kinda proud of himself. A few minutes up the road he sees a car going the other way, but it stops, they pass. As he gets closer the car moves again and pulls completely off the road. The trucker is curious, so he stops to ask if everything is alright. The other driver sheepishly admits, "Well, when I saw how high up those lights were, I wondered just how $% exclamation marking wide that thing might be." Both had a bit of a laugh and went about their business. Not exactly creepy, but a fun story nonetheless. My grandfather was a truck driver at a lumber yard for about 25 years after World War II. He once told a story about how he and a coworker both left at the same time from the yard. My grandfather would often go first and the others would follow, but the other guy insisted on taking the lead. So they're driving on the highway, full speed. His coworker gets cut off by a car that just switched lanes without looking. He slams on the brakes. My grandfather noted this and, being so close behind, tapped the brakes and was able to do an emergency slide into the left lane without slamming into anyone. The car was rear-ended by the truck. My grandfather pulled over and camped, running back only to find that the contents of the load, tons of lumber, shifted forward during the hard brake and destroyed the cab, decapitating his friend in the process. While my grandfather was no stranger to such sights in the war, especially as someone who fought on islands in the Pacific, he said this was especially tough on him, since when you're in war you prepare yourself for this kind of thing. You don't expect something so gruesome in civilian life. My grandpa served in Europe in World War II, and he saw a friend get his head blown off by a sniper. They were going through a town they'd already captured, and my grandpa was the tank commander. His friend was in the tank in front of him and was sitting on top, got hit. The other one that haunted him was a bomb dropped from a plane. He and a buddy jumped under a tree for cover. His buddy got peppered with shrapnel and died right there. I can't even imagine going through that kind of stuff daily. Well, I was cherry-picking the rotor wheel while I had about 7 hitch knots flapping in the wind. My rig couldn't take more than that 'cause the sprocket monkey we keep in the back was rattling around the whole trip. Anyways, I saw 4 hitchhikers out on the middle of the night with walking towards a straightaway that was about 40-mile stretch. Walking in the freezing cold for that long, and I don't think anyone was coming down the road I was on for a while. So I decided to pick them up. I slowed down in front of them about 100 feet and looked into my rearview mirror, and they just bolted as soon as I came to a complete stop. All 4 of them took off running into the night. Probably in the low 20s and not a town for at least 35 miles. Not sure what happened to them, but I never could find anything in the papers. Not so much creepy as pants-shittingly startling. It was like 2:30 am-ish. Middle of nowhere Arizona, I think. It's been over a decade. Hadn't seen another vehicle for at least an hour. Kinda dangerous territory, because that is when tiredness comes creeping in no matter how well rested you are. That lack of stimulation will make you sleepy a lot easier than you might think. I was always taught that if it was on 4 legs and walked in front of my truck to just brace for impact and hit it. Yay, it might tear the shit out of the tractor, but dynamiting the brakes can cause a jackknife or rollover. It's cheaper to fix a tractor than it is to fix a tractor, a trailer, and replace the destroyed cargo if you roll over. Not to mention if you roll a truck, good luck getting hired by any company worth working for. This next part may have been exaggerated by my brain, but I am not embellishing for story's sake. All of this sudden, out of apparently nowhere, what seems like 100 tumbleweeds come rolling into the middle of the highway, including a couple that seemed to be the size of a large SUV. Freaked me out. The most scared I have ever been was going over Donner Pass one night in late April. I had checked the weather reports and the only concern was supposed to be light snow flurries at the highest elevations. CA will issue mandatory restrictions indicating you have to put chains on your tires, so I checked the CA website and no restrictions were called for. I went through the inspection station at Truckee and they were asking if we had chains on the truck, but still no call to put them on. About 10 miles up the road, the sky opened up into the worst whiteout blizzard I have ever been in. I could barely see 50 feet in front of me, and there had been another truck ahead of me, but I lost sight of his lights completely. I could see his tracks in the snow. I slowed down to about 20 miles per hour. Then, just to make it worse, the wind was blowing and the snow was swirling in all directions, and I began to experience a strange vertigo, like I was flying and tumbling in the air. I had to glue my line of sight on those tracks in front of me and hope that guy did not drive off the road. I made it. It only lasted about 30 miles and it turned to heavy rain. I told my dispatcher if I ever had to go through there again at night and any snow was forecast, I was going to shut down until daylight. Obligatory, not a truck driver, but there's a person I used to work with who worked evening shifts, and walked home. Part of his walk went through a road surrounded by trees, so at night, driving through it looked sort of creepy and isolated. When a car would drive by he would start walking like a zombie to freak people out. I saw him one time going through there at night. I saw him start doing the zombie walk. Immediately burst out laughing, because he wasn't just making it up. Lol. Okay. So right now, I'm working nights for a job that requires me to drive around my town without stopping for hours and hours and hours. There are some weird things that happen around the time I work, from 11:30 p.m. to 8:30 a.m. First, I was in residential neighborhood and came to a stop at a four-way stop sign. I glance over and there is a man in nothing but tighty-whities, a children's-sized bicycle helmet, and roller skates. So I drove away pretty quickly after that, saw a guy who'd just been mugged laying on the ground on an apartment complex parking lot. I had noticed a car with its lights off screeching out of the lot as I was pulling in, but didn't think anything of it until I saw the guy. Called the cops and bounced. Stuck around the area and saw him getting carted into an ambulance 5 minutes later. Lots of wildlife. Mostly normal stuff for my area: deer, coyotes, raccoons, skunks, foxes, etc. I was driving slowly down a street the other day and noticed a coyote near the road, so I pulled over to look at it. It immediately looked over at me in the eyes, squatted and shat directly in front of me without breaking eye contact. It was weirdly kind of majestic because he just kinda kicked grass on his business and trotted off looking super proud. I got ramrodded by a cardigan convoy on the back 9 of the last stretch of I-59, a real mean crew too. A bunch of pack ya before they meet ya types. I held steady, as I always do, but the crack hard on just wouldn't find me. Anyway, I fumbled for my brights and when I did it done was a sign that said "Stit on" and I done thought, what is "Stit on?" And then I realized I was looking through my mirror. Not me but my father. A guy was walking down the highway in the middle of nowhere wearing all black while it was pouring rain. He was found mangled sometime after the sun came up. Many trucks go through this section throughout the night. The guy got hit by a truck at some point and my dad is positive that he would have been one of the trucks to run him over after the initial hit and kill. He just said that the weather was so bad that night and there's so many bumps in the road or kangaroos to hit that you just start to ignore the weird noises and keep driving. I was driving my Volvo Truck highway on the way to Stuttgart, nothing unusual, just normal night ride on highway. Then from nowhere, another truck incoming into my way driving around 100 kilometers per hour, high beam lights into my eyes. I was blinded for a second, thinking, oh boy, this is how my driving career is going to end. I keep honking, but he does nothing, still going at full speed into my truck. Seems like he fell asleep on the wheel. At last second I turn right, he keeps going straight, and bam, he crashed. Whole truck destroyed. I just keep driving away, stopped for a second, told to myself, well, this was close. And I exited my Euro Truck Simulator 2 game, and called it for that day. My uncle from Guatemala drives trucks across the country, and his stories still make me shit my pants. By far the scariest one is when he said he was taking a nap on top the bed of the truck, when he looks over and sees a very elderly woman. He described her as having very long nails, long white stringy hair, and extremely hunched over. He was in the middle of nowhere, but he could see her entering into a small cave with a candle in her hand. He noped out of there. That's some real third world witchcraft shit you won't see in the States. I was so tired once, when I first started driving and stupidly pushed things too far, I saw a large boat on a trailer driving beside me without being pulled by anything. Just literally a boat driving next to me. Somehow I couldn't register the truck pulling it. Add that to the giant tree that was growing suddenly in the middle of the highway just ahead of me and it was way past my bedtime. I never pushed sleep deprivation that far again. I'm not a trucker, but once when I was driving from Texas to California, in the middle of nowhere, up ahead I saw flames. As I got closer there was a car in the middle of the road on fire. Normally this wouldn't be very creepy. Except for the fact that I was in the middle of the desert and had been driving for hours through it. There was no one and nothing around for miles and miles. I was in the middle of a wasteland. I got out of course to check and see if someone was in the car. No dice. Then I thought I heard something in the trunk. A couple of banging sounds. Of course it could have been something in the trunk maybe exploding. But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe someone was in it. The fire was way too hot for me to get in there and try to open it. Whipped out my phone to try to call 911, had no signal. At that point it occurred to me that I may have just stumbled across a murder. That the person who did this might be watching. So I got out of there. As soon as I had a signal I called the police and told them everything that I saw. A few hours later they called me back to confirm the area that I was in. They didn't find shit. So yeah, that's my creepy story. So I'm on I-85 coming north out of Atlanta just above downtown just before the Peachtree Street Bridge. It's late at night and pouring rain. There are flashing lights up ahead and traffic is heavy but it's moving. I come up on a single car accident. Tons of police and emergency vehicles. Just then a cop points to me and stops all traffic in all lanes and I am on the front row. There is a car sitting sideways in the center lane and it has already been attached to a wrecker but not lifted. All the emergency personnel are staring at the car. There is a police photographer taking flash pictures. So you can't see why this is a big deal. And you can only see anything as the flash goes off on his camera. As the wrecker driver begins to lift the car, the photographer flashes away. As the car rises something large begins to slide off the front driver's side wheel out of the wheel well. I am staring too, trying to see what he is photographing. Then flash, a woman's bloody body flops onto the wet asphalt. Then darkness and flash there she is again. It was horrific, her clothes were shredded and she was covered in blood and road grime. Flash, darkness, flash, darkness. Could not have been more freaky if it had been scripted for a movie. To this day, I don't know where she came from. Pedestrian? Jumper? Passenger? No one deserves to go out like that. Then a cop waves me on and off I go. With the unimaginable sight still flashing in my mind. Not a truck driver but I am a train engineer. Through the course of my runs I have hit numerous animals and it isn't that remarkable because even the big ones just kind of bounce of the train. One night we were coming through an area and out of the corner of my eye, I see a deer. It casually walks up the ballast and into the middle of the tracks. It wasn't even concerned that we were about to hit it. Just about 50 feet away this buck looks up and because of the reflection of the headlights or something he had bright red glowing eyes just staring at us in the cab. Upon impact the deer exploded, pieces went flying everywhere. Of course, the head comes up over the nose of the cab and bounces off the windshield. On this very night, 10 years ago, along this same stretch of road in a dense fog just like this, I saw the worst accident I ever seen. There was this sound, like a garbage truck dropped off the Empire State Building. And when they finally pulled the driver's body from the twisted, burning wreck, it looked like this. I was doing a antelope over a 75 through a skewed rock slide in Kansas. Stopped at a gas station and went inside to buy a drink. Was met with a faceless puppet who pointed a gun at me before shooting itself. Ran out of there as fast as possible. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share and we will see you in the next video.